Okay, perfect. So it's recording. So Su Chen, I know you know me. Victoria, I don't think we've met before, but my name is Christina Cardona, and I'm the coordinator for internships and career programming for Rockefeller College. And I will actually share screen before I forget as well. And then, okay, perfect. Here we go. Okay. So, as I said, I am the coordinator for internships and career programming for Rockefeller College. And I will pass it over to you, Meg.
Okay. Hi, Suchan. Hi, Victoria. My name is Meg McCarthy, and I'm the Career Services Coordinator at the UAlbany Alumni Association, and I manage the UAlbany Career Advisory Network platform.
Great. Thanks, Meg.
Mhm.
So what we'll do is we'll just kind of get started here with a couple slides from me, and then I'll pass it over to Meg, and then kind of back to me based on what Meg discusses and general like informational interview tips and suggestions. So, and feel free to, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat or use like the raise hand emoji or just, interrupt as needed. I wouldn't say that, but there is only three of us plus me on the call, so that should be very, very manageable. But yeah, so we'll get started here. So just a little bit here about networking. So what is networking? And we do also have our career handbook. So in addition to the other career handbooks that are on the Rockefeller College Career Services website. So, just a little bit about networking here. So, developing and maintaining connections. A lot of times, just networking in itself can be kind of a term that is thrown around, but not always accurately defined or, explained. So, being clear with that, it's not just a way to get a job. I think a lot of times people just say like, okay, yep, you got to network, which is part of it, but also it's important to remember that it's a two-way process and that you shouldn't just be networking with the sole purpose of getting a job, and those conversations should be still meaningful and around, professional goals from both sides, both from you and the person you're networking with, whether that's somebody that's, you know, at an organization that you're interested in, or maybe even a mentor or a colleague, a professor, even. And that being said, on that note, networking is about who you know and who they know. So, for example, making connections with professors, making connections with your classmates, even all of these people and so many more are can be part of your network. And it's really important to utilize them in the way of that you're all here to help each other. If you know somebody in a certain career that that a friend of yours would be interested in, being open to making those connections for them and just again, having this be a mutually beneficial process really goes a long way. And it doesn't just end when you get a job or when you secure that internship. This should be a long lasting process, as you go throughout your career journey. So, and that being said, there are lots of ways and places to network. I know a big one is LinkedIn, and I won't focus on that for the sake of this workshop, but we do have a boost your LinkedIn profile workshop at the end of March, on March 26th, that will focus more on how to enhance your LinkedIn profile to better network and better provide information that is relevant to for you and for your network. So, but besides LinkedIn, there's also a lot of other places that are great places to network, including UCAN, which Meg is going to talk about today, and just the importance of career chats and informational interviews, which are a great networking tool. And we'll go into depth more as to what that means. So we'll keep moving forward here. And again, if you have any questions about anything, feel free to ask or interrupt as needed. So I know normally asking the chat slash the participants, you wouldn't have to be as participatory. And also, if you don't feel like it, I totally get it. But I am going to ask, you both, and even Meg, I will ask you as well, of what makes you nervous about networking and informational interviews. So feel free to unmute yourselves or put it in the chat, anything that comes to mind. And I also get it, there are only three of us, so if you don't feel like it, I understand too. I'll give you guys a second.
I can talk about my own experience
Sure, that'd be great.
quick. So I started out my career at a medical specialty association. And so we did continuing medical education for physicians and then advocacy on behalf of physicians and their patients. And so I think for me, having that be my first job out of undergrad was really nerve-wracking because I had a lot of imposter syndrome. I'm like an early 20s person and I'm speaking with physicians who are very accomplished people. And I didn't feel like I belonged in the room. So it was initially very uncomfortable for me. But what I learned in the process of going to board meetings and receptions and things like that is that they were oftentimes just as uncomfortable, if not more uncomfortable than I was. And so, with a little bit of time and practice and exposure, even though it made me uncomfortable initially, I think that kind of helped me long term to get a little bit more comfortable with it and to push through some of that initial discomfort and imposter kind of feeling.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's a great, I mean, I'll ask you a follow-up question too, Meg. I mean, how did you, like, do you have any specific, and you might go into this later as well, but any specific tips for kind of overcoming that imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I realized that I had to go in with a plan in a way. Like, so having a couple things that I could talk about reliably, some that were related to, maybe advocacy or maybe something, work related. And then also just kind of having in mind, some of what I did at the organization. And I think it feels kind of, um, at least at first for me, it felt like inauthentic or something to kind of practice beforehand. But I found that it helped. And then it just kind
Yeah,
of initially made me feel more confident so that I could have those more authentic conversations and sort of build relationships over time.
absolutely. No, we appreciate that. No, that's a really good point. And I think it's just, it's hard. I feel like the first steps, and we'll talk about this more after too, but can be daunting, but putting yourself out there and, preparing, I think does make a big difference, absolutely, with that process. So thank you for that.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna
Does
keep going.
anybody else have thoughts about that, or are we
Thanks, Meg.
here to talk more about it? Yeah, I just didn't want to be the only one to
No,
share.
no,
Other
no,
people had
absolutely.
things to say.
I mean, yeah, I don't know if Suchin or Victoria, do you guys have any thoughts? And if not, I don't want to put you on the spot either. It's totally okay. All right, so I'm gonna move on with that. I mean, I'll probably mention more later as well, but I mean, I definitely can relate to that myself. I think just having those, like, setting the, and we'll talk about that more in depth after, but having those conversations and making that initial contact can be intimidating, especially as you're, new into a field, or you're just out of graduate or undergraduate school and you're trying to really get your foot in the door with an organization or with a company or whatever the case may be. But I think that what I found helpful in my own search process was just being open to learning, and also, not going into these conversations, which again we'll mention later as well, but not going into these conversations as if that was just, to get a job. I mean, I think seeing, okay, what is the culture like in this organization, is this field really a good fit for me, and making sure that those questions that you prepare for these conversations are authentic and that they're things you really want to know
Mhm.
rather than just setting up these meetings or chats for the sake of, securing a job because it doesn't hurt. And again, within that whole idea of networking, of course, too, adding to your professional network is beneficial for both of you, So just keeping that in mind and being genuine in those conversations, I think really goes a long way as well. So, moving on here, I mean, kind of like what I was just saying and what we were just discussing as well, is some benefits of doing career chats or informational interviews are kind of just developing a strong circle of contacts and authentic and genuine professional relationships, and also having this network of people that you can, kind of refer back to and bounce ideas off of, ask questions, also people that know you both professionally and personally is also helpful as well to know what kind of positions would be a good fit for you or just things that would benefit you professionally, knowing your experience and your background and what you're really looking for. I personally reach out to, even if it's not a formal, informational interview, I reach out to my past undergraduate and graduate like mentors and staff who have helped me throughout my professional journey thus far and just with any questions about starting a new job. And even if I wasn't, of course, at the university that I attended, which I did not attend university. I did not attend UAlbany myself, so that does apply to me. But that being said, just any tips for starting a new job, any things to keep in mind. That's just an example of how to continue networking and, keeping in contact with that, with your professional network, and your circle of contacts. So, and that being said, gathering information as to, like I was saying before, career advice, career trends, if you are looking for a potential job or an internship, kind of leaning into this network. And the network can be your family, your friends, your professors, your friends of friends, and just being open to all of these connections because you never know what they can lead to as well. And as I said, just being willing to learn. I did mention in my last career skills workshop the how to make the most of your internship or new job, just the importance of kind of being a sponge and absorbing information around you, learning from people, and utilizing this information in a way that benefits both, both of you. And again, just that importance of a mutually beneficial network or, mutually beneficial relationship. So going forward to, in being genuine with this, it's an opportunity to improve your conversational skills as well. Having an informational interview or a career chat at first can be very, feel intimidating, especially as you're doing your first one or your second one or whatever. But also seeing, okay, I'm adapting to this specific person who I probably don't know very well, their personality and what they are, kind of what they're asking you as well, and it's important to be prepared for not, of course, a formal interview, but they will likely ask you, what are your career goals? What are your career interests? And this is a great chance to, again, be more relaxed but still be in a professional conversation and work on how to kind of bridge that gap, and it's just again helpful in your overall career development. So kind of going off of that, Meg, if you want to add as well any of your best tips for career chats, and Turkin, thanks for joining. I saw you just joined. If anybody else would like to comment as well, if you all have done an informational interview or a career chat before, I'll open that up to you all for what are your best tips for career chats.
I can say a couple things. I think, like Christina said, having some kind of sense of what you're looking for um, in the chat, like what you're looking to learn. So if it's about a particular industry or if it's about what kinds of things you can be doing now to ultimately, land a job or get to where you want to be, like what, you know, things to be involved with on campus or just in general, if there are like national organizations that you can look at. Um, but I think having a clear sense of, even if you don't know what you want to do, just kind of how to navigate that a little bit with questions about, how did you find out about your particular career or what was your path? And open-ended questions tend to be better, I think, because it gets the person talking. And oftentimes, you don't know what you don't know. So if you just leave it open-ended, oftentimes people will kind of answer some things that maybe you hadn't even thought of in the first place. So I would say going in with a plan, having some specific open-ended questions to kind of keep the conversation going, um, I think would be my best tips. And then also, you know, just etiquette things like thanking the person for their time during the conversation. And then afterwards, sending a follow-up note so that you can kind of keep that conversation going. Or if it's not like a regular mentor type relationship where you're regularly in contact, every now and again having a touch point so that down the road, it's important to kind of think of it as just any other relationship. So you don't want to always just go asking for something. But if you just touch base every now and again, to share something that happened that your semester, an award you got, or, class that you took that was really great. Those kinds of things help so that when, like, for example, you're looking for your first job and you have like a salary negotiation question or something like that, you can feel more comfortable kind of reaching out to that person because it's not just transactional at that point, I would say.
No, thank you, Meg. That's super helpful. I mean, and I think, yeah, like you said, transactional is like the a great word of just not how to have these conversations. No, that's great. I think I another example I will provide quickly is just another tip for career chats is, a lot of times the people that you're networking with and that want to help you also succeed, in your professional with your professional and career goals, they're likely going to be just very willing to have these conversations. So, as Meg said, just being very appreciative of this. This is not something they have to do, but having these conversations to help you kind of narrow your career path is really helpful, and that being said, I know for me personally, I had my one of my previous supervisors slash like mentors for my undergraduate university when I was going through my job search process, he he had suggested that we do like regular check-ins slash like preparations for starting the job search, what to be considering, things like that. And we met every couple of weeks. And this was something, he did not have to do. This wasn't even something I had asked. This was just because he wanted to help me grow and to find a good fit for myself. And again, but obviously, if I hadn't continued that relationship from undergrad, and if we hadn't spoken, this wouldn't have happen, but this was a really great benefit to having those relationships lasting and not just being transactional. So, and feel free again if anybody wants to share, you can write in the chat or say out loud as well. So, what are career chats? We've kind of gone over this already, so I won't spend too much time on it, but just a scheduled conversation that we'll talk about setting up and how to do so afterwards, but with the purpose being, again, getting career advice, developing long-term relationships, and helping to narrow your career path and see if it's a good fit. And it's a career conversation. It shouldn't be a formal job interview, but keep in mind you should still be, and I do have a slide on this as well, but you should still be professional and etiquette, as Meg mentioned, still remembering this is a professional conversation, even if it's not a formal job interview. So, on that note as well, we briefly mentioned this, but how do you find people to have career chats with? So again, your network is really important with this. So, in that your network is a large circle of contacts. You might think, okay, how many people do I know? But you might not be thinking, oh, but then there's this person that knows this person I know, and just that whole extension of, that umbrella of contacts, right? So, that being said, thinking about this, within school, within maybe your part-time job, your internship, or if you don't have an internship, another like a volunteer organization that you participate in, classmates, like I mentioned, club members, if you're on an e-board for a professional or a leadership organization, those individuals as well. UCAN, which again, Meg will talk about in a second. And just be recognizing that your network is not just, a certain, type of person, or it can't be this person or that person. It really can be anybody that you know, as long as they're willing to, again, have these conversations. And we can, of course, talk about that after as well. But anything you'd like to add, though, on this, Meg?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Think you covered it.
Perfect. So, and I will pass it over to you, Meg, to discuss
Okay.
UCAN.
All right. So I don't know how many of you have heard of UCAN or used UCAN. Um, so if anybody has anything to share, feel free. I'm going to share my screen. And did that show up?
Yep.
Okay, terrific. So UCAN is short for the UAlbany Career Advisory Network. So I know Christina mentioned LinkedIn earlier. So think of it like LinkedIn. It's a networking platform that's online, but it's exclusive to the UAlbany community. So that means only people like alumni or graduates of the university or faculty and staff and students can use it. So it's our specific community, which I think is really helpful because you already share something in common with the folks on the site, and the alumni have specifically signed up because they want to provide career advice to students and fellow alumni. So we tend to get a much higher response rate from UCAN versus just like a cold outreach through LinkedIn. And so it's a great way to practice the professional communication skills that Christina was talking about earlier. It's a great way to build your professional network. So if you don't have a lot of those people already built in terms of like an internship or jobs already, then this is another great way to make those connections and build your professional network. It's a great way to explore different options. So if you don't know what you want to do yet, it's a really nice place to have conversations with multiple alumni who are doing things that might be of interest to you, and just hear more about what their day-to-day looks like, what kinds of degree or degrees they have, how much, if there are like special certifications, anything like that, to help you kind of plan your own pathway, I think is helpful. I always say that experiential learning is the best learning. Like if you can get out and do an internship, or if you're working, and volunteering somewhere or doing a club. But if you can't get that, the next best thing is really talking with people who are doing things to kind of get a sense of what they did to get there, what they like and don't like about their particular career. And oftentimes by having those conversations, it really kind of helps inform your own decision making to some degree. So we've had a lot of students and alumni use the platform. So as we talked about earlier, it's not really a place where you come out and ask for a job directly or feel like it's an actual job interview, but we've had a lot of students and alumni use the platform and then land jobs and internships as a result of the connections they make. So I think, I'm sure everybody's heard it's not always what you know, it's who you know. And this is one way to kind of expand your network. So I'll just go quickly through here. It's connect with an alum. So this is our student page, and I'll zip through this quickly, but basically you just register using your NetID and password, and you enter it, go through the registration process. It depends how much you know about what you want to do or not. But it usually takes about 5 to 10 minutes. I always recommend adding as much information as possible to your profile, because it tends to provide better matches with alumni later on. But certainly if you're not sure what you want to do, just click what you know, and I'll show you in the platform, there are ways to search more specific things. So all of the information or connections happen through the platform. So even though you're using your NetID and password, everything is privacy protected. So they won't see your NetID. It'll kind of, just all go through the system. So you won't see their email address or, any contact information that way, but you can search for people, you can connect with people, send messaging, you can actually connect through video or phone right through the platform once you get connected. So it's hopefully kind of a one-stop shop overall. So here's just some general information. We've kind of gone over this during this session, just talking about what it is and what it isn't. So, and I think all of us know at this point, having been on Zoom now for years since the pandemic, but just make sure that you make a good first impression, have an appropriate background, are dressed neatly. You don't have to be in like a suit and tie or any, kind of dress or anything like that, but you should look put together, just so that you come across well on camera. And I always recommend adding a phone number to, and I'll show you where to do that when we get into the platform. It's important for these conversations to be responsive. And so if you reach out to someone, signing up for text message reminders is always a good idea, because it gives you notifications so that you can be as responsive as possible and get back to that person right away to schedule. Or it also gives reminders when you have an upcoming appointment. We have had students and alums miss appointments from time to time, and that's just never a great impression. If you can avoid it, or at least contact somebody beforehand to say, we're going to have to reschedule. That's always good etiquette. So if you click here on our website, and we can put this information in the chat, and then I'm sure Christina can share it afterwards too, but this links over to the Office of Career and Professional Development. So there's a whole list of questions for informational interviews. So it's a really great resource. It's short, it talks about what informational interviews are, and then it will give you some options for asking questions if you don't really know exactly what to ask. So if you go here, the career conversation, we're going to do a quick demo, so I won't go through it, but you can just click on the arrow over here to kind of go through, from beginning to end, how the system works. And then we also have sample messages here. Again, it's a professional communication, so you don't have to be perfect, but you need to be prepared. And so these are options for you to look at just for samples. But basically, you just want to say hello. You want to tell the person who you are, what your major is, if you have one, and what you're interested in connecting about. So it can be really quick. It doesn't have to be like paragraphs of information, but just kind of make sure you have good punctuation and everything's capitalized appropriately, because that stuff all does come across in any of these communications. So the system also has general career resources, which I'll show you as well. And then my name is here, and my email address. So if you ever have any questions either technical questions about the platform, or if you're having a difficult time finding a connection, certainly reach out to me and we can talk about what your needs are. And we can get you hooked up with somebody, not necessarily on the platform, although I have different ways that I can search, and Rockefeller grads tend to be pretty well populated on the platform and very willing to help, and to serve, as alumni advisors. So so that's good. So we'll just go here.
And I can always too, I'll follow up in our follow-up email with Meg's information and also,
Yeah.
with the website link as well.
Yeah, thank you. So here you go. If you don't already have a profile, you can go to join today. I'm going to go to sign in. You as students would use this one. Um, you could do LinkedIn also if you have a LinkedIn, but there are ways in the system. If you do have a LinkedIn account already, you can, kind of sync with LinkedIn to populate your information. So just going to go here. Okay, so everybody can see.
Mhm.
Okay. So because I have a profile already, I'm brought right to my dashboard, and you can kind of go through some of the things. There's always ways to edit. If you have motivators, or if your career interests change, you can always edit that information either from the dashboard or by going up here. So there are some people here that are listed that kind of match the same criteria as my profile. But I always recommend to students going right up to connect and then to community, which is meet network professionals. And so anybody who has a message option here um, is an alum that you can reach out to. If, like, for example, Don Cohen here, he's an alum. He's actually online now, so you could actually technically chat with him now. I would say, generally speaking, though, good professional etiquette is to give people a little bit of advance notice. So if you are reaching out and you want to meet with someone, give them at least a week to 2 weeks between when you reach out to when you want to have the meeting. It kind of increases your chances of getting an appointment. And it also shows the person that you're reaching out to that you value their time. If somebody is a fellow student, I'm trying to look for one here. All of them are showing message, but it would just say view profile. Oh, here's one, view profile. So you won't be able to reach out to fellow students on the platform. This is really for students to connect with alumni, but you can look at people's profiles if you're looking for ideas about how to populate yours, or what kind of language you might want to use for certain experiences you've had and things like that. So let me go up. I was just, sometimes we have board members on here, so I always like to go to their profiles, but we'll go to Kristen here. So you can kind of, it looks very similar to a LinkedIn profile. So you can see the person's educational background and then their job experience as well. So you can book a meeting with her, or you can message her directly, and we can kind of just go down so you can see. This is how you book a meeting. So it'll show available dates and times. So you really just click something quickly and then say, I'd like to connect, and that person will get back to you, hopefully. Like I said, we have a much better response rate, generally around like 70%, I would say. So it's not 100%, but it's much higher than if you were just doing regular kind of cold outreach. So that's something to keep in mind. But if we go here, you could do a general message. And there are some templates here, so you can click on any of those. And then I always recommend customizing, based on your needs, because if somebody gets just a canned message that's not specific enough, it kind of comes across as like you're not really putting enough effort in, and you won't really get what you want out of it. But it's nice to have templates available. so that you can use them and then customize. So I'll get out of that and cancel message. And then if you want to book a meeting, you can go directly here and that will show up there. And then you essentially just click what you want, and then that information gets sent over to the person via email, and that's the way you communicate. So let's say if anybody has anything you want to put in the chat in terms of a career field that we want to look at, I'll take something. And Christina too, if you have something, let me know.
Okay, thanks, Mike. I'll
Mhm.
give you guys a minute to put something in the chat about a career field. I'll put I'll let's see. I won't put it in the chat, but I'll just tell you maybe policy analyst.
Okay. So this is like Google. So sometimes you put something in and it, comes up with a lot of good things. And sometimes you need to adjust your search, but it's generally a really good way if you just want to narrow down to a particular area. This is the quickest way to do it. And so anything, if somebody has like a policy degree or something like that, it'll pick up kind of both words, but you can see some of the people that show up as a result of so policy analyst, budget analyst.
Yep.
So this really kind of narrows down and gives some other options. Ben is a board member at the Alumni Association
Oh,
too.
great.
So yeah. Um, So the other one, we can say attorney. Oh, you know what I did? This is good because you need to go in and get rid of policy
Oh,
analyst.
right.
Yep.
Delete or clear the filter.
Yes, exactly. They just changed it, so I don't know how to do it. Let's just do attorney. Okay. So that brings up some attorneys as well. And then like a law professor. So again, it's kind of nice even just to do some searches and to see
Yeah.
what's out there, because some of like the first job I had, like I said, with a nonprofit organization, I didn't even know that field existed when I was in college. You know what I mean? So it's like sometimes you see things that pique your interest just by searching here or LinkedIn or, just some general sites. So I always recommend doing that as well. You can also filter down by grad year, by topics, industries. So this is a nice way to, like I said, just find people that would be a good fit for you in terms of a conversation. And so we have over almost 2,000 alumni who have volunteered to provide advice here. But we also have over 200,000 living alumni across the globe. So if you're looking to work internationally at some point, or you have a very particular interest in a field that maybe isn't represented here, I always encourage people to reach out to me, because we have a whole data team for our alumni, group. And so we can request lists that are very specific to find people for you to connect with. It takes a little bit more time, but we're certainly, happy to do that. And by and large, I would say our alumni are very, very willing to help. And I think everybody kind of wants to give back. Most people do, and, give people maybe what they didn't have in college, or maybe just making those connections. I think they're very willing to help overall. So you should keep that in mind as well. So these are just some general career resources. You can look at career paths. So I'll click on that really quick. You'll see like salary ranges, excuse me, and different fields, and you're gonna kind of read more about what the requirements are. So these are just nice general resources. If you're kind of unsure about a pathway, you can do specific skills here. There are some articles and videos about different topics as well. So this is a nice way if you're not quite ready to make the initial outreach and have like a one-to-one discussion, these are just some general career tools that you can access as well. Um, and then the last thing, the sign up process usually does ask for your cell number in the beginning. But if it doesn't, you can go here and you can go to my profile and add it and then opt in for messages there. And like I said, change your pathway information or your interests at any point, you can do that. So I think I'll stop there. If anybody has any questions about the platform now. I'm certainly happy to answer them. And if not, like I said, Christina has my contact information and we'll share it so that if you have questions along the way, you can certainly reach out.
Thank you so much, Meg, no, for sharing this, and we really appreciate it. And yeah, I'll absolutely, following this, this session, we'll be sharing that
Okay.
information.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, feel free. This is a great time to say it in the chat or raise your hand or whatever, however it best suits you. And I'll also stay on after the call as well, if anybody has questions or if you'd like to reach out to Meg, following. Again, I'll provide that information. So I will share screen again here, but no, thank you very much, Meg, for taking the time to share this info with us.
Sure
So,
thing.
so I'm just going to go down here. You've already shared this. Here's the link again, just for your reference. And then, yeah, and then this is what I'll go into here as well. So basically, kind of going off of that, making contact, preparing for the interview, conducting the interview, and after the interview. So these are all, now that Meg has laid the foundation for us with UCAN and informational interviews, now it's about, okay, how do we actually get, start that process? So, and definitely, as Meg said, utilizing those sample messages are really helpful if you're wondering how to best start this process as well. But again, as Meg had mentioned, just making sure it's still authentic and unique and that it's not just a copy and paste conversation starter as well. So, email is best. So, again, this is, I guess you would probably agree as well, Meg, that sometimes you'd likely, at least in the case of UCAN, you would be communicating via their site. However, as necessary, and again, this is kind of off of UCAN, but still, um, they might say, oh, you can utilize my email as well.
Yeah, I would say definitely like once you make the initial contact on UCAN, some people feel more comfortable on Zoom. If somebody's local to the Albany area, some people might say, or students might prefer to meet in person. So you can definitely do all kinds of things with how you choose to meet, or just regular cell phone. But yeah, initially I would say email is best or, a message through systems so that you can make the initial contact.
Thank you. And yeah, I mean, and going off of that as well, I mean, again, sample emails are in the handbook and on the UCAN website. And as it's said on the UCAN website, they'll usually say how frequent or basically the response time. Like I know the one profile you had clicked on, Meg, said usually responds within 2 days. But as Meg had mentioned before, too, keep in mind, you don't want to come across as too aggressive or too like spamming their email or anything. So because essentially they're helping you out. And it again should be a mutually beneficial process. So I would say, again, give it a week or two at most, and then you can reach out politely, just following up, circling back if they had received your message and requesting, if their availability like permits to have a conversation, but just being mindful that if you don't hear from them, it's might be best to explore other options for contacts. So again, step one is just making that contact. And step two is preparing. So as we discussed before, preparing in terms of Meg had mentioned, which is a really good point, making sure if you do end up having a Zoom conversation, right, that your background, your virtual background is not distracting, that you're dressed professionally, you don't have to dress like completely in, interview attire, but still keeping in mind it's a professional conversation. Being prepared with, again, who are you talking to? What do you know about them? Of course, you're not going to know as much as you will until after the conversation, but going into that with at least some initial knowledge will help so that they see, oh, you're actually interested in having a conversation with them and learning, and that it's not just something you feel like you have to do to check a box in order to get a potential internship or a job, for example. So, preparing questions in areas that, again, these are outlined in the handbook and on UCAN, but career preparation, job content, and responsibilities, which could be more of like, what does a typical day look like? What is, a cycle like in your industry? What are your responsibilities essentially for your particular position? And it's always people, again, people like to share, especially if they've agreed to be for UCAN, agreed to be a mentor, agreed to be somebody who's going to provide you with this knowledge. They're likely going to be interested about yours as well, and also just being respectful of and asking questions, saying like, okay, how did you get into this field? What has your journey been like? And again, just showing that interest, showing enthusiasm, and being genuine in those conversations really goes a long way. Also asking about potential trends in the industry and profession, sharing some of your own interests, but also keeping in mind it is, again, as I've said many times, but a mutually beneficial agreement so that it shouldn't just be about, oh, I'm looking for this. What can you do to help me? You also want to be just there to learn as well and be listening to their story. So then actually conducting the interview, as I mentioned, being professional, whether, with your background, with your attire, making sure you're on time and treating it as if it was a real interview, but remembering at the same time to not be it's not going to be to the same level of formality. So it should be a conversation, a career conversation. However, keep in mind that you want to still show that same respect and professionalism. And they'll likely ask you a little bit about your background. So just being conversational, again, being authentic and genuine in that. And because, again, it should be a back and forth, it's not just a formal interview. And as Meg had mentioned before, asking broad and open-ended questions. So realizing like, okay, what can I learn from this conversation? Not just asking a yes or no question that is not really going to provide you with the type of insight that you're likely looking for. And as I said, you're there to learn, you're there to listen, and that enthusiasm and authenticity really goes a long way. So I can't emphasize that enough. Also, bring a resume, even if it's not discussed, it could be helpful even just for your own reference if asked about your background slash, your interest areas. Sometimes it's just helpful to have that nearby so that if the person that you're having the career conversation with asks you about a specific experience that maybe got you interested in this field, you can reference that as well. And they might ask too, just in case any opportunities open up. I've had myself a lot of informational interviews, and when I've had them, some of the conversations they do ask to send a resume just for their reference along. Some of them don't. Some focus just more on their story slash their journey, which is also very valuable. So just being open to either way, even if a job or an internship discussion does not occur, it's still helpful to have these conversations. And also just ending the meeting by again expressing gratitude, asking for contacts as appropriate, um, who may be able to help you further. Just building that and expanding on that network is great. And then also just making sure to end on time, something that I usually would do is if it starts to be close to about a half hour as a good frame of reference, if that was the time you allotted for. If the person you're interviewing with does express like an interest in wanting to extend the conversation, just making sure, asking them, how are you doing on time? Just making sure that you're mindful of that in case they have other meetings, which they likely do as a professional. And again, expressing gratitude. So then following the interview, evaluating the discussion, it's important to take notes too. You don't have to be furiously writing so that it seems, forced and like it's too formal, but it can be helpful to just have a notebook nearby, or if you're taking notes digitally, that's fine too, but just jotting things down that you're learning. Also, if they provide you with additional contact information, just making sure to keep note of that as well, so that when you do a follow-up thank you email or thank you note, that you're responding, or that thank you email is genuine and that you're saying, oh, I really enjoyed that we talked about this specific thing, and just being concise and like clear in that. And you can look to the handbook and UCAN for samples of how to best write a thank you email. And again, networking is an ongoing process, as we keep saying, these should be long lasting relationships if you can, because that will help you just overall enhancing your interpersonal communication skills, enhancing just your professional journey as a whole. So definitely keeping in mind also with what you learned, did it help you? But also you can always ask them as well if they want to talk about anything further, if they have any questions, just making sure again, it's a back and forth conversation. So, and I will open it up to you all. I know we've got a few minutes left, but feel free to ask any questions you still have about UCAN and informational interviews to Meg and I. And I will also, like I said, I'll be here after, 5:30, but I'll open it up to you guys now. And you can always put it in the chat as well, or send us an email afterwards. And as I have this screen open, if any questions come up, I'll just include this slide where we have further resources, including networking, building a circle of contacts, the Boost Your LinkedIn Profile event/workshop that will be happening on March 26th, Handshake, and our career and professional development website. That's actually the main one, but we do have the Rockefeller one as well. And some upcoming career events. So I'll just scroll through these quick for your reference. Day 2 of the Government and Nonprofit Job and Internship Fair is tomorrow in eTech. And then we've got some upcoming information sessions and other career skills workshops. And as I said before, this presentation and contact information/resources for UCAN and informational interviews will be shared after as well. So I'm going to stop the recording. Like I said, I'll hang out for a couple minutes. But thank you all for being here. And I hope that you learned a lot. And thank you, Meg, so, so much for being here and for providing your evening with us to talk about UCAN. So, like I said,
Well,
I
thanks
will.
for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Meg. I'm going to stop the recording, but feel free. You guys can hang on as you'd like as well. Stop share and stop recording.